In 3 days, 7 murders. In a quiet town, in the middle of a perfectly normal day, death came silently. There was no gunshot, no scream, just a pill. A pill that was supposed to be a cure, but now it was killing. The victims were unrelated, no animosity, no history, they had only one thing in common. They had all taken Tylenol. And the police confused. The community in complete terror. And behind all these silent deaths, a dark and sick mind was silently laughing. A case that began with the death of 7 people became one of the most controversial and mysterious crimes in the last half-century in America. Murders without signs, without a killer, and without a clear reason. A case that not only shocked the medical community, but also changed the security structure of the pharmaceutical industry forever. This is the story of the Tylenol murders. This case not only terrified millions, but also changed the rules of the pharmaceutical industry forever. But the scariest thing, the killer was never caught. A case that still, after 4 decades, remains unanswered.
7 deaths.
September 29, 1982. An ordinary morning in the suburbs of Chicago. No one knew until the evening the first body had fallen to the ground. Mary Kerman, a 12-year-old girl, woke up with symptoms of a cold. Her parents gave her a Tylenol capsule, and a few minutes later, Mary collapsed. No signs of life. She was rushed to the hospital, but before the doctors could do anything, she was dead. Cause unknown. A few hours later, a 27-year-old man named Adam Jens also went into cardiac arrest at his home. Doctors suspect a heart attack, but the story didn't end there. A few hours later, 2 other members of Jenna's family who had came to his house to comfort him both fell to the ground after taking the same Tylenol. In 48 hours, 3 members of the same family had lost their lives. The doctors were confused. The police still didn't even know if they were dealing with a murder or a mysterious, but when the first test was done on the pills, the truth came out. Cyanide, an industrial poison, odorless, colorless, and faster than any death imaginable. Soon, the similarities began to show. All the victims had taken Tylenol pills, and all of those pills from the same brand and the same city. The killer had no knife, no gun, just a few pills in a bottle. This wasn't just a medication error. This was a planned murder, and the killer was still on the loose. And now Chicago was breathing in fear. By dusk that day, the death toll had reached 7. All the victims, before they died, had one thing in common: taking Tylenol. For the local police, the case was beyond their control. The official order was issued. The FBI entered the case, not to solve a murder, but to prevent a national disaster. The investigation didn't stop for a moment. Interrogation, sampling, and a review of the Johnson & Johnson company's production line, the manufacture of Tylenol, began at once. But, strangely enough, no trace of contamination was found anywhere in the factory. No employee was a suspect. There was no sign of internal sabotage. The FBI came up with a chilling clue. The contamination bottles had been turned to their stores after production. In fact, the killer or killers had poisoned the medicines outside the factory and put it back on the shelves like a normal customer. The silent bomb in the middle of the medicine shelves breathed silently, and no one knew how many more bottles were still there. People were terrified. Bottles of medicine were being collected from homes. Pharmacies were closing, and the media headlined with one sentence: "Unknown killer turned Tylenol into a weapon." Meanwhile, Johnson & Johnson faced a crisis that threatened its future. Had the beloved American brand become a killer, or was it itself a victim? The FBI had one goal: find the person behind these poisonings. But until then, there were no leads, no suspects, and only one thing was clear: the killer is still at large, and maybe the next bottle is on the shelf of your local pharmacy. Doctors were confused, families were terrified, pharmacies were locked down, and suddenly news broke that changed the atmosphere completely. A strange letter was sent to the headquarters of Johnson & Johnson. The sender threatened if he wasn't paid, he would put more contaminated bottles on the market. Signature of the letter? Just one name: James Lewis. Not a murderer, not a professional terrorist, an unemployed man from Boston. But how could he have access to drugs 1,000 miles from away? The FBI entered his house, but they found no cyanide, drugs, or related evidence. And what's more interesting, he himself said that none of the murders were his doing. He just wanted to take advantage of the situation. So, was someone surfing the waves of death? So, who was the real killer? Meanwhile, Johnson & Johnson, under heavy pressure from society and the market, made a decision that changed the history of the pharmaceutical industry. All bottles of Tylenol were recalled from across the United States. All production was halted. And for the first time, a major pharmaceutical brand accepted full responsibility, even without being proven guilty. Once the victim hadn't even finished his own bottle, he had taken a pill from his friend's purse, and the bottle was still missing. So maybe the contaminated bottles were still on that street. Maybe someone unknowingly is still storing death in their cabinet at home. The real killer has not yet been identified, and the nightmare is not over yet. A few weeks after the death of 7 people, the drug market collapsed, and companies were forced to change the drug packaging system once and for all. This case caused the first time in history, and drug safety standards were changed. But despite this huge change, one question still remains unanswered. Who was the killer? James Lewis was arrested, but not for murder, for extortion. He was imprisoned for years, released, and then died quietly. But the police could never prove that he was the one responsible for the poisonings. But the Tylenol murders were never closed. We still don't know why this happened, or more importantly, which house is the next pill in. Some murders don't have a killer, or maybe we just haven't found him yet.